but I knew it was smart to ask Rav Yair to go first today. I knew he would do whatever I asked him to do, because he's a good guy. Because now everyone feels good, everyone feels inspired, the Niggin, the Rav Yair, so I can let you down slowly. It'll be good, it'll be good. I think actually going last, the first thing I want to say is, and this is, I hope, going to be an important part of what I want to say. I agree with absolutely everything that everyone said. Everything everyone said all week, I agree with every word that they said. And this is going to be an important, I think, part of what I want to try and express to you today. I think I will begin briefly, autobiographically, because I think it's important. I grew up, I went to Highline, the Hebrew Institute of Long Island. It became Michael's school after. So it's that kind of school. You know, I knew there was such a thing as Minchen Marav, but I don't think I ever had an idea that one davens it, actually. There was no meaning for Minchen Marav in the school. It was that kind of school, you know. But
now there is.
I'm sure, it's always getting better, you know. But I was always from there. I never took off my kippah. I davened every morning. You know, I was always into it. And the it that I was most into, the thing that I think I began with, is I think also the thing I'm still with, which is very much Jewish culture, or to borrow, I'm blanking, what's his name? Reconstructionist Judaism? Mordechai Kaplan. To borrow Mordechai Kaplan's phrase, Jewish civilization. I think that was always the thing that was my starting point, my opening, not Frumkeit, not God, not learning, not mitzvahs, not chagim, but all of it. And I grew up at a time when it was very easy to be that way. I grew up at a time that was transformational for Judaism. It was transformational for the world, you know, the 60s. The Six-Day War, I don't know if people know this, was very much a part of the 60s. The Six-Day War was very much a 60s phenomenon. It was like cool Israel, and little cool Israel beat those nasty, backward-looking Arab countries. There's a tape, an audio tape that I've heard on the radio every once in a while, usually on his yard site, of John Lennon singing Hava Nagila with Akiva Nof, who became a Chaver Knesset. So it was like, Israel was like hip in the 60s. And so Israel was, I cannot overstate how central Israel was to my Jewish understanding. We followed, before the Six-Day War, we followed the news and the terror attacks. We used to have like quasi-military terror attacks. That was the style in those days, a little bit more. And in the Six-Day War, I think I've told some of the people who was doing finals at high school. I was 14 years old, and they allowed us to use, I'll use a phrase you might not be familiar with, transistor radios. We could bring transistor radios to the final, and the teachers walked around with transistor, because we thought there was going to be, and I'm quoting, another Auschwitz. That was the thinking, that all the Jews in Israel would be killed. That was the clear, those were the odds, you know. Nick the Greek in Vegas was giving very bad odds for the Jews. And then when it didn't happen, we all thought it was a miracle. We all thought, Time Magazine, the New York Times, everyone thought it was a miracle. And living through that was transformational. You know, I do want to mention Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. My relationship was minimal. I didn't know him personally. But living then, I once introduced him at a concert. It just worked out that way. I was the only adult in the place, and they asked me to introduce him. He came to the yeshiva, to Shvatim Iftar for a Shabbos. We went to Modi'in for a Shabbos. He was part of like what you did. You know, he was like an entertainment feature. Like, oh, let's do a Shlomo weekend. Alive, you know, him. That kind of Shlomo weekend. And that was also transformative. He was way hip. I mean, he was really part of the 60s, as you all know. As you all know. And so it was very easy to be excited about being Jewish in the broadest cultural way you could be. By broadest cultural way, I mean Isaac Bashevis Singer. I've read everything I get my hands on by Singer. Singer, do you know Singer? Familiar? Nobel Prize winning, Yiddish, translated to English. I highly recommend, not Frum at all. There's one Frum book, the Baal Tshuva, sometimes called The Penitent, that I recommend. I recommend everything he ever wrote. Even the bad Jewish writers, Roth and Melamed and Bellow, everything Jewish. The word that I sort of got my eye caught on pages, the second most times, was jewelry. In other words, I would see the word Jew somewhere, and I would look after it, like what's going on with the Jews. So for me, it was just the being Jewish, and everything about Jewish culture I found compelling and interesting, and I still do. And for me this makes sense because I think first and foremost we are creatures of our culture. We are created by the culture and cultures, because all of us, I mean, we're confused. American Jews, you know, with a hyphen, and I live in Israel, obviously, for a long time, so I'm Israeli, I'm an American Jew, and you all know I'm an Anglo, I'm guilty of being an Anglophile, so I made it my business to spend time to live in England for a little while, so I've tasted that culture. I'm not going to pretend like I'm in it, you know. I'm too much what you see before you, and I'm English. But I'm into it, you know. I think we all choose cultures to be into and involved with and identify with. And for me, Jewish culture was my culture. And then when I got a little older, I somehow felt at the end of high school, college, that I should be doing this on a more serious level, in a more serious way. And I started reading, you know, more than just Singer and Roth and you know, that stuff. One of the early books that got me, I don't know if I should recommend it for guys in yeshiva, because it's not the real thing, but still, Buber's Tales of the Hasidim and Tales of Rav Nachman I found very compelling. It's not real Hasidus, it's Buber's take on Hasidus, but if you're in the mood, I do recommend them. And I started thinking about being more serious about Judaism. I went to Israel for the first time in 1971, after my first year of college, and I was completely blown away. My girlfriend, who I ultimately married, which makes it mutter for me to talk about her, right? My girlfriend graduated right after, I was a little older than her, and so in her yearbook, I wrote, the only N in Hebrew. Can you imagine? At a Jewish high school, the only N in Hebrew came from this shmendrik, and it was L'shanim Haba'ot B'Yerushalayim. And it freaked her out completely. She was a singer, right? But then she went to Israel first. She then moved to Israel without me. It was a long story, but I got here in the end. I got her in the end, and I got here in the end. And so going to Israel that first time was transformational. I knew I would live in Israel. And I started, while in college, learning Torah seriously for the first time. There was a wonderful Rebbe, Rav Mordechai Berkowitz, Zichrono Livracha, who was a local shul rabbi. I had not learned in high school at all, not a word. I remember something about flying camels. This is tricky with flying camels, right? I remember something about flying. That's sort of all I remember from all the time I was in high school. So I started learning Gemara a little bit, and I found it interesting. And then I was lucky enough to fall into Rabbi Chaim Bravner's yeshiva, Yeshiva HaMivtar. It wasn't called that then, but it became Yeshiva HaMivtar. And the yeshiva at the time, I came in 1973, the yeshiva was about taking ownership of our literary and intellectual heritage. That's what the yeshiva was about. Like, you've been consumers, and you go to shul, and the rabbi makes a sermon, and you daven, a little bit more, a little bit less, but you don't own this stuff. You're an outsider. The insiders have long beards and live in Brooklyn, and you're not one of them. And the idea was, I thought at the time, revolutionary, and it was. The 60s and 70s was a time of a tremendous explosion in Torah learning. A lot of Baal Tshuva yeshivas, a lot of non-Baal Tshuva yeshivas. And we thought that, okay, we're going to take this thing over. We're going to make it our own and make it ours. We're not going to be dependent on what the rabbis tell us. We're going to conquer these texts and know these texts and be masters of these texts. And I want to jump right to the me thing, the me about me, and it's mine, that, you know, who's it about, that, which has become a recurring theme. It's completely about me. It's only about me. And the reason it's only about me is because that's all you have. The Ramban is, and the Rambam, and name any name you want, is of course much cleverer than I, and a much greater Talmud scholar and Torah scholar than I, and a better person than I. But he's not me. That's the disadvantage he has. And so I don't think it matters that much if you first learn the Rishonim and then you say Pshat. I think we're smart enough to put them aside and try to learn on our own. But the fact that at the end of the day, the only Pshat I will ever say is mine is a basic human truth. I'll never understand it the way the Ramban or the Rambam or the Vilna Gaon or anybody else understood it. I can only understand it my way. We have to embrace that. We have to celebrate that. We have to recognize that. And this was very much the ethos of the yeshiva at the time when I was there as a student and as a teacher. Also, in addition to that sense of ownership, that sense of it all filters through me anyway, so I might as well own that, there was a broadness of vision at the yeshiva that fit into my sort of civilizational approach. Like, it's all grist for the mill, it's all Torah, whatever I hear, whatever I think about, whatever strikes me as interesting is part of my Torah personality and my Torah worldview. And I see that as a part of the whole notion of a Torah's Chaim. It's not just a Torah's Chaim because I take my Torah and I go do chesed with it, or I make sure I act nice with it, but because it's a Torah that comes from Chaim. It's a Torah that's made up of life, not just that influences life, but that is part of life. It's not like there's a world and then there's Judaism. There's a world and then there's Torah. It's all the same thing. Torah is inextricably bound up with the world in which it is learned and experienced. The Haredim, in the deepest, darkest Meisharim or B'nai Brak, cannot help but be of the 21st century. They can pretend they're fighting it, they pretend they're beating it, pretend that that's shtus and it's not real and it's all Western values. But when I see them at the kotel with the cell phone or on the airplane arguing with the stewardess, about their seat and they're sitting too close to a woman and this and the other, they're in the year 2013. They choose to fight it, to pretend they're not, but that's a reaction to 2013. They are made by 2013. So Torah is you can't run away from the world in which you live. And you don't want to. But you do want it to be a Torah Chaim. You do want it to be a Torah that's honest and real. So to summarize, I'll also maybe stop here and then go to the next piece, right? I'm half done, I think. The key words for me here are Jewish civilization, Morasha Kihilat Yaakov. We have a large tradition, a gigantic tradition that includes learning, it includes chulent, and it includes Purim spiels, and it includes Isaac Bashevis Singer, and I think it's all Torah. It's all Torah. It's all part of what the Jewish people are doing. This is, of course, much more true in Israel. When I was young and foolish, I used to say, I don't say this anymore, I used to say, the garbage men in Israel do more for the Jewish people, right, than the Talmidei Chachamim in Chutz La'aretz. I used to say it. Because Israel is so important. Because a Jewish state, an opportunity to really make the culture our own culture. To not have to navigate kinds of cultures and kosher cultures and treif cultures. And now it's Christmas, so do I take that in or do I push it out? Always be involved in that dance is, I think, very energy consuming and damaging to the Jewish soul. And that's why I think Israel is the place where you can really open up the gates and let it all in. Because although there's plenty of nonsense and things that are not acceptable, things that are bad and evil and wicked in Israel, it's all ours. It's all ours. It's our obligation to really make it part of our culture and our civilization from our perspective, which is the Torah perspective. So broadly, I would say that the key for me going in to actual learning, this is like before I sort of started learning. The key to me, and it remains the same, the key to me is the centrality of Israel as a place where we can really step on the cultural gas and make a whole society, a whole nation that is fully Jewish, completely Jewish, rather than fighting the fight that you do in Golis of, well, I want to let the world in, I want to be part of the world, I want to be part of my Torah, but there's so much junk out there and so much not Torah out there, how do I do that? Which is one of the reasons I think it's so important, Israel is so crucial. Now, as I got into yeshiva, I every once in a while I've noticed that there's a key text would jump out at me, like something. Wow, I'd read something that would really turn my head around. And I want to, in the next few minutes, share some of those with you. Some key texts, some key ideas that for me, are foundational in terms of Torah study, in terms of Jewish life, living and studying Torah. The first group sort of are about the plasticity, the flexibility of Torah, of halacha, of the way we approach it, how it's not a salad. It's a liquid or a gas, one or the other. It's certainly not a salad. And perhaps the most important one for me, and I had the pleasure of learning with some of you guys in my optional I think Monday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon shir, is the Gemara in Chagiga, which says, "Ef shar lebeit midrash b'lo kiddush." It's impossible, ef shar, to learn Torah, to be in a base medrash situation, and not mechadesh. And the ef shar is what I think is so powerful. It's almost like a scientific sort of rule, it's a hypothesis. If you don't make a chiddush, it wasn't the base medrash. If there's no chiddush coming out of it, it's not a base medrash. Because that's what Torah is. And this goes back to what I said earlier, the only Torah you'll ever say is your Torah. And so your Torah that you say has to come from 2013. And has to be affected by the news you heard in the morning. Has to be affected by the fact that Obama is pushing Netanyahu to do this, and affected by important things, silly things, whatever it is that makes you you, and makes your brain make the connections that it makes, that has to be what goes into your Torah. Because otherwise you're not learning Torah. You're dusting off some museum artifact. You're remembering Torah rather than doing Torah. I said the word remembering, and it reminded me of something. This I think might be controversial. A few of our speakers, our dear esteemed speakers earlier in the week, spoke highly of, people who know everything and people who go over it 100 times. And I'm afraid to say this, but I'm going to say it. I don't find that as impressive as I think I'm meant to find it. I don't think it's about remembering. I don't think it's about having the knowledge at your fingertips. I think it's about Havana, about understanding, and the understanding comes from a whole human being. I was once told a story, I won't tell you who it was about because it might not be true. It might not be true. But the fact that it was told to me is important. A rabbi, a very well-known, well-respected community rabbi said, Rav so-and-so, the well-known posek, he's unbelievable. All he does, he chazers over Shas, once a week, once a month, whatever it was. He nothing else, that's all he is, that's all he knows. His wife once asked him what he wanted for lunch, the meat or the schnitzel? And he asked her, what schnitzel? He didn't know what schnitzel was. And the guy who told me the story found it so impressive. He's so cold, kulo in Torah and down on Michelle Halacha. He doesn't know what a schnitzel is. And I'm like, oh God, I don't want this guy paskening for me. I don't want this guy paskening for me. It's about life. It's about Darchei Shalom is a halachic principle. It's not an extra halachic principle, right? Mishum Eva, Diracheha Darchei Noam. These are halachic principles. They're part of halacha. There's not like halacha and then you also have to try and be nice. Being nice is a halachic principle. Being in the world, of the world, involved with the world is a halachic principle. So, I wish I knew everything by heart. What little tiny I know by heart, I'm very happy I know it by heart. But I don't know if that's what it's all about. It's all about achieving a kind of Havana that's about integration. It's about bringing it all in, bringing it all together. I'm like so tempted to start saying people's names, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to. Okay. So, Ef Shalom Beis Medrash Below Kiddush, a very crucial text. Of course, you all know this one because you went to Jewish camps or whatever. But Tanu Rosh Lachnoi is a crucial text. Lo Bashamayim Hi Nitzchuni Banai, which means my sons have made me eternal. It's not what it means. My sons have defeated me, but it's a cute little drasha. You know the Gemara, right? How the Jews didn't listen, the Sanhedrin did not listen to God. And people know this Gemara so well that they forget what it really says. God told them the halacha is one way. And they said, we don't care. We think it's the other way. I'm done. I can just sit down and we're done. Right? If that doesn't show you that learning is about bravery and thinking what you think and saying what you think and being in touch with what the reality looks like to you and not just to a remembered truth or a retrieved truth. So we've said it and we're done, and if you don't know that Gemara, well, you should, to the end you have to learn it. Right? Not the Tzchuni Bonai. Not that. You have to go to the end. Where somebody dies. The end of most good stories in the Gemara, somebody dies. And that story, I'm going to say one more sentence about that story. That story is set in an arena of Ben Adam L'Chaveru. It's set in the arena of Onas Dvarim. That's the topic that story is in. Which means that Talmud Torah is first and foremost about how we treat each other. It's not first and foremost about the halacha, which is on some, platform somewhere, standing like a statue on a plinth. It's first and foremost about how we interact. That's what that story is telling us. Got a lot more. I'm going to have to skip a few good stories. Okay. Here's a Rav Nachman. It's Reish Mem Hey in Likutei Moran. It's a crucial Rav Nachman, I think. It's about Hadrei Torah, the journey of learning Torah, what happens when you learn Torah, what happens to you when you learn Torah. He says the following words. I'm going to just say them. It's a pshat, what I'm going to tell you I think it means. You have to really learn the whole thing. Maybe my pshat is wrong. Ki haTorah hu bechinas Adam. Kamoshe kasuv, zos haTorah Adam. The pasuk is zos haTorah Adam ki yomus ba'oel, as you will know. That's what he says. You have to learn the whole Torah. But I think with Nachman, it's here. All we have is what we think. All we have is what we do. There is no Torah that's not my Torah. There is no Torah that's not filtered through my personality. Even if my personality tells me the Torah is not about me, the Torah is outside of me, and I have to sort of get to it and transcend myself to get to it, even that is a subjective, personalized statement. You understand? I think I'll finish with this. I came to Rav Kook late in life.